to have our topic today, and this is something we do monthly, is the power of the Black women's vote, Census 2020, and protests to move a Black women's justice agenda forward in the midst of Corona-19 and civil unrest. So our moderator for the hour is my good sister friend and leader, founder of Diverse and Engaged, as well as Girlfriends Pray. It is my honor to introduce D.C. Marshall, who will serve as our moderator. And I thank all of our sister leaders that are there, our congresswomen and our faith leaders and our that are on this call, and our state leaders that are on this call today for this first panel, which will be about an hour, and we will have a second follow-up panel following this one. So Dee, I'm gonna turn it over to you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much. Excited to be here, even in these times, but excited to be able to have this conversation and to hear from our leaders and the gatekeepers of our community. We're going to move into this really quickly, just managing for time, but also we know in managing for time, we'll be able to get substantive insight, information, and direction from our leaders. And so we have with us here on this first panel, Congresswoman Karen Bass, Chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, Congresswoman Bonnie Watson-Coleman, mine, actually I love them all, but I'm a New Jersey girl, co-chair of the CBC Caucus on Black Women and Girls, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, a senior member of the Judiciary Committee, U.S. House of Representatives, and the Honorable, not just yet, but I'm gonna bring them in later. You also may see on the screen Dr. Barbara Skinner Williams. We're gonna get, I'm sorry?
William Skinner.
Yes, I'm sorry, Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner. I should know this. This is my mentor, beloved, and so we ride out together. So my apologies, Dr. Skinner. Co-chair of the National African American Clergy Network, and Reverend Leslie Dwight, Social Justice Minister, Community of Hope, AME, Temple Hills, Maryland. Welcome, welcome, and welcome, everybody. So I'm going to jump right into manage for time. I'm going to start with the Congresswoman Karen Bass. As the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, can you please share with us what the CBC is doing to ensure Black people who are disproportionately impacted by COVID-19 pandemic around voting safely in the 2020 presidential election cycle and to be counted fairly, because that's a major concern for us. Can you please share?
Sure. But let me begin, first of all, by really thanking our leader, Melanie Campbell, and the other dynamic women that are here, because we all know that Black women rock. But let me just say that the first thing we have to do is we have to stay alive until the election. How about that?
Yeah.
So the Congressional Black Caucus is proposing a focused, concentrated intervention where people are dying. So if you have the disproportionate death rate, we need to address that. Three things: there needs to be focused testing, there needs to be the contact tracing, and then our communities need a lot of resources for public education, so that one, our people go out and get tested, that we cooperate with contact tracers, and also that we make sure that we observe the public health protocols. That hopefully will keep us alive until the election. And then when it comes to the election, we are certainly fighting for voter security. There should be an option of mail-in votes. You could either put your vote in the mail or you can take it to the poll. So we have to make sure that that happens. And so we're fighting for the resources in the various COVID bills. So the COVID bill that we passed out of the House the other day, the HEROES Act, has money for that. Now it's in the Senate, so all of us need to push the senators. Let me just close on this note. In the last 3 months, we have lost over 100,000 people in this country. It is shocking to say that. Well, we know a disproportionate of those 100,000 are Black. So at a minimum, it was 20,000 Black people that we've lost in the last few months. Now, you know, it is rare that a person dies of COVID who's under the age of 18. So you just sit with this for a minute. We lost over at a minimum, 20,000 Black voters. in the last 3 months. So one of the things that we should think about doing is launching a campaign that says not just polls to the souls, but I'm not just souls to the polls, but how about we go out in honor of those people that we lost, and why don't we register 2 people to vote, and we stick with those 2 people until they put their ballots in the box in November. We know that the president wanted to shave off a percentage of the Black vote. Well, I guess he did.
Congresswoman, thank you for that. Congresswoman Jackson Lee, as a ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee, what are the ways your committee is addressing the urgent need for policing reform and lack of leadership by the Trump administration to investigate civil rights violations, police misconduct, and other forms of injustice? And also, can you share what the reparations legislation, HR 40, you are championing will do to address historic impact of racism and white supremacy on Black America?
I hope everyone can hear me now.
We can hear you.
I'm delighted. I'm going to join Chairwoman Bass and my good friend Bonnie Watson Coleman to say thank you to Melanie Campbell and all of you, and certainly thank you to our wonderful host, moderator, and indicate that whatever we do, we'll be doing as a team. And I'm delighted to be working with the Congressional Black Caucus, and you'll be very gratified of the number of members of the Congressional Black Caucus on the House Judiciary Committee. So let me do this. I have a little bit of show and tell, and then I will continue my theme. Let me hold up our local newspaper. 60,000 people were in Houston, Texas, the home of George Floyd, yesterday, peacefully honoring his family. Many women and children were in the mix. Obviously, as we know, the pain of the numbers counted before any movement was by the officer with the knee, up to 8 minutes and 46 seconds. So many mothers were there, and we know that he called out the word mama. I say that to say that it sets the whole tone of where we are, even though we know that we've had a history of Eric Garner and Walter Scott, Tamir Rice, Michael Brown, and others. We now have Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and others. And I happen to have been with John Conyers in New York on Abdou Diallo. So we really have to act. And what we have to act on is the premise that we have the COVID-19, and rightly so, we have been leading on testing, as Karen Bass has said, and other elements. But likewise, we have a pandemic of racism, and that has compounded the crisis around the criminal justice system and policing. Knowing that we have good law enforcement officers, every member of Congress has worked with federal and local law enforcement officers, but we know that we have a crisis of immense need right now. So if I might coin a phrase, that we are in a moment in history where Black women are going to be at the forefront of ride or die. It's going to be our voices, it may be our bodies, it may be our minds and our intellect, where we are riding or dying. And so we have begun some work that is going to culminate tomorrow, where we'll be introducing the Law Enforcement Trust and Integrity Act. That is a front-end solution where accreditation is challenged, or the requirement of accreditation, which, by the way, there are 18,000 police departments. People should know that they don't have to be accredited. But accreditation is tied to federal funding. The idea that de-escalation has to be utilized, it seems like it's not a word that law enforcement wants to use. And that is, you got to pull back before you use excessive force. Pushing down on recruitment so that you find people that understand that bias cannot be acceptable in 2020, that diversity is paramount, that if you have a discrimination mindset, you can't be a police person in the United States of America. Funding, federal funding tied to that. And as I said, the training, and just a myriad of other issues that get us on the front end. Of course, there are other legislative initiatives that we'll be talking about, the eliminating of a chokehold nationally by our members that are on the committee, the cooling down period, all of these dealing with police accountability. That's a broad terminology. Ilhan Omar is on the bill that we're about to introduce tomorrow, along with other members of judiciary, in fact, members across the caucus, when I say caucus, Democratic caucus and others, and then Jason Crow, who happens to be a member from Colorado, and members of the Judiciary Committee. So we wanted to have a broad base of people's outrage to get on a bill that starts at the very forefront of changing the culture and the mindset of policing the nation. Then, of course, there's racial profiling, which we've introduced that has very large support as well, that deals with what we face, which is a Black person gets racially profiled in the nation's department stores, on the streets, in the car. How do we know that the historically Black college students in Atlanta were not trying to get home in their car? They were immediately racially profiled. Oh, you obviously want to be instigators, as opposed to people trying to get home in the midst of the curfew, but their glass was broken, they were dragged out, they were tased. Did they listen to what they were saying? That's racial profiling. And then, of course, there is this question, many people don't know that officers who have had bad misconduct issues against them, they shop around. And they go from one police department to the next. We're working with, this happens to be supported by law enforcement, that there is not a way for you to be a bad actor over here, counting to 8 minutes and 46 seconds, and then going on to be hired somewhere else and perpetrate the same kind of violence that you perpetrated before. So we are serious about police accountability. Of course, there are issues of criminal justice reform that our members have been working on: mass incarceration, elimination of mandatory minimums, elimination of solitary confinement, treating women who are incarcerated in a manner of dignity, such when they're pregnant. There's a whole list on that. But right now, the immediacy of police accountability, we've been actually working on this. When I say that members who have come and gone on the Judiciary Committee for more than 2 decades, anybody needs to look up Abdou Diallo. So this is where Black women can have this agenda. We are the mamas. We are the ones, and we have a wonderful member on our committee, Lucy McBath, who lost her son to violence. I would almost say under color of law, when people take into their own hands, just like Trayvon Martin. I've always argued under color of law, because these people are thinking they're the police officers on the street. And she has been a vocal supporter for change in the right way. And we have a bill coming through by Frederica Wilson that will be another, how should I call, treatment and cure, establishing a Black boy and man commission. Now let me go to the reparations bill that I'm so glad you mentioned it. Is there ever a moment in history when African Americans, Black people, literally built this nation? You know, in a first hearing that we had in Judiciary Committee, one of our witnesses, Mr. Coates, really put it to a question of and a thought. Well, why should we have reparations? We didn't do anything. 2019, 2020, we didn't do anything. We didn't have slaves. He made a simple response of dignity. But you benefited from slavery. And that's what we Black people have to say when they get asked about reparations and they don't really have an answer. We built this nation because we made cotton king. There was no overhead, because you had no salary, no insurance, no life insurance, no workman's comp. You had nothing, but you had bodies that were brutalized. You had babies taken from mothers so they could be raised as slaves and groomed to be in the field. So you built Wall Street, you built the banks in New York because it was on the backs of us for cotton. So here we are in 2020. No one can deny in the midst of COVID-19 that we have suffered the brunt of disparities in this nation. I don't want to mention Tuskegee and Rosewood, and we just commemorated the Tulsa riots, where you literally burned Black businesses and people and everyone down and took in 200, 300 people and lost lives. So we have a time that everything dealing with reparations, the commission to study the reparations for African Americans proposals right here today. And in light of that, you have the HR 40, which is the commission that is not inactive, it is active because there's a commission to study reparations and proposals. What are proposals? To provide systemic changes to respond to 400 now and 1 years that the African Americans were in this country, and there has not been any closing, any substantial closing of disparities in healthcare, education, the economy. We will lose 1/3, whatever the number is, of businesses under COVID-19, and they will not come back. African American businesses, small businesses. I believe there should be some answer to that. We should give them the resources, put aside the PPP, to say you will start your new business again, and we will support that. So I think this is the time. I don't want any woman to die, but this is a ride or die time. And I think African American women, the Black Women's Agenda, Melanie Campbell's roundtable that she's always purported, the spiritual leadership of Barbara, if I might, I call her Dr. Barbara. So like Dr. Phil, Dr. Barbara is my Dr. Phil. She's not my Dr. Phil, she's my Dr. Barbara. Anyhow, I think this is a moment that we can deal with police accountability. In fact, we should not rest until we do that, no matter who the president is. And this is a moment when we can deal with HR 40, the commission to study reparations and proposals for African Americans. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Thank you so much. We're going to go over to Congresswoman Bonnie. And if you've just tuned in, this is Count Black Women and Families Unity 20 week. And we are so grateful that you're here with us. This is the Black Women's Roundtable Talk. It's a virtual town hall series. And this is sponsored by and hosted by Melanie Campbell, President and CEO of the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation and National Convener of the Black Women's Roundtable. She and the coalition are a trusted advisor and voice for women, Black women, and of our community. So we're excited to go over to Congresswoman Bonnie. I have a question for you. And again, the topic, everyone tuning in, this is the power of the Black women's vote and Census 2020 and protests to move a Black women's justice agenda forward in 2020. So if you're wondering why we are here, and in the midst of Corona-19 as well as civil unrest, this is panel 1. Melanie Campbell is gonna host our panel 2 in just a minute. But let's go over to Congresswoman Bonnie Watson-Coleman. As a member of the House Committee on Appropriations and co-chair of the CBC Black Women and Girls Caucus, can you please share how are you working to address economic and health disparities impacting Black women and families, criminal justice, and prison reform?
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank Melanie for inviting me to be on the panel, and I'm certainly delighted to be on the panel with my colleagues and with Reverend Skinner. I just adore her and respect you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Pray over us. Pray over us. The good news about following Sheila Jackson Lee is that she's so comprehensive because she has such a memory, such vision, and she's been around and she knows a little bit about everything and a lot about most things. The bad thing about going after her is that she leaves you generally very little to say. So let me just talk about linkages.
Okay.
I am as the co-chair of the Congressional Caucus on Black Women and Girls, along with Robin Kelly and Yvette Clark. And the purpose of founding that caucus was to elevate the issues that are uniquely ours because of the intersection of both our sex and our race. And so we use those opportunities to highlight issues, to talk about policy, to evaluate legislation, to look at those things that we think have represented a gap as it relates to us. And they're on all issues. You know, they're from economic issues to access to healthcare to our particular health disparities issues. But what's most important right now, I think that is that even the caucus on Black Women and Girls and the individual members of Congress who are part of the Black Caucus, we all have individual legislation that deals with the issues of today, whether or not it's accountability with the police or the over-incarceration of African Americans, or if it's the disparity in detentions of students, young Black girls in school. All of those things right now are being gathered together under the leadership of Karen Bass and the Black Caucus, so that there is this campaign that we are going to engage in over the next few weeks or whatever, that addresses those issues that are affecting us. The role of Black women and how important it is for us to get our communities hooked into the census and filling out the census material. That's so vitally important. So to be able to communicate on this level with Melanie's coalition and other collaborations, it's important for us to use our platforms, our homes, our relationships to make sure that people are filling that out. Then it's the whole issue of the voter registration. It's important that we do honor the deaths from COVID, the things that have happened most recently to Mr. Floyd and to Breonna and to all the others who came before them who've been murdered by the police. We have to register and make sure people are voting because of them. And we need to make sure that we are as safe as we possibly can be while the virus is still hanging over us. And I'm really concerned about the impact of the virus and these protests that are taking place, because there's no such thing as safe distancing, social distancing in these in these protests. So we are trying to work seamlessly in doing a number of things. One is to pull together a campaign that consists of education and legislation and mobilization and conversations, communication, collaboration. So it's good that we as members of Congress are on this call with Melanie and the roundtable. We are then going to make sure that we continue to do the things on our individual social media platforms to raise the issues of what's happening. How do you stay safe with the virus among us? How do you ensure that we have finished all the things that we need to do with regard to the census so that we can get the resources that can come into our communities to help our communities to stay safe? And what are we doing as it relates to the legislation that says everybody's got access to healthcare? And when we walk into a doctor's office, that we're not assumed to be different than any other white woman that walks into that doctor's office, and that our issues, our complaints are treated in the same way and we're getting the same level of care. How do we ensure that there's not this over-incarceration of Black men and Black women? And so we're working right now on so many levels at one time because that is what is before us. This is an incredible moment, a moral moment, where we have got an opportunity to stand up, and Black women have been standing up. Yeah. They keep talking about our being the most dependable voting bloc, the most dependable this. We certainly have held up families when they've taken the men from our families. This is the time where we will use our voice, amplify that voice, and be able to motivate and mobilize and energize and educate our respective communities to do the things you need to do individually and collectively, and to hold the people that you elected to office accountable. And so that's why these opportunities to be on a panel discussion that's touching women all over the country is so vitally important. And that's why people need to know that it's the Congressional Caucus on Black Women and Black Girls, that it is Frederica Wilson's task force on young Black men, that it is the Black Caucus, all of which are working together, working in consort with the Judiciary Committee. But it is the Black Caucus that's going to lead these issues of police accountability in our caucus right now. And we're all working together to make sure that no issue is left unaddressed. So I thank you all for, Melanie particularly, thank you for giving me the opportunity to just sort of share what's on my mind.
Yes. I think she blew a kiss there.
She did.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so thank you, Congresswoman. And so I'm gonna go over to,
before you go, I just wanted to first thank our Congress women leaders, and just to make sure there wasn't anything else you wanted to say, because I know you all are moving fast. And I want to also say that, you know, to make sure that folks are following us on social media. and that this National Coalition, Black Women's Roundtable, we partnered with several civil rights organizations, the CBC, and that Thursday is National Day of Mourning, that we are all lifting up. That's George Floyd his funeral will be taking place. And it's a day of mourning for, yes, George Floyd, but it's also for Breonna Taylor. It's also for Ahmaud Arbery, right? And all those names that we know and names that we don't know who've died, been killed unjustly by police or vigilantes. White nationalists and white supremacy is still alive and well in this country, and that's impacting us as well when it comes to violence based on race, especially. So I want to thank the congressman before they walk away, and see if you had anything else to say, because we're doing really great on time.
Melanie, if you don't mind, I would like to say just a couple of more things. On behalf of the Congressional Black Caucus, this Friday, we're having a telephone town hall called Living While Black, talking about the attacks on Black people during COVID. If we wear a mask, we're turned away from places because we look scary. If we don't wear a mask, we're being cited by police and sometimes even incarcerated. Next week, look to the Black Caucus to hold a briefing on the Hill related to police abuse and several other actions. So stay tuned. We're going to be busy until we get this legislation done. Thank you.
And can I, Melanie?
Yeah, yes.
Well, first of all, I'm going to take entitlement so I can thank my chair, Karen, for her monumental leadership, and say that we are joined at the hip in working on these issues. We will complement her work with a Judiciary Committee hearing on police accountability, which will be driven by all of us who have this embedded in our heart and DNA. Bonnie Watson Coleman is in the tradition of ladies, women, sisters who have three names. And so I wanted to thank her for engaging us in so many issues and nuances dealing with Black girls and women. And if I might, isn't it tragic that we also have to find Black women and girls, because the girls are daughters, they're cousins and sisters of the Black men that are at the hands of misconduct of police that wound up, if you will, losing their life. So I wanted to add to Bonnie Watson Coleman's point of acting and advocating for our legislative agenda, but most of all, if we want change, we've got to find a way to vote like we've never voted before. And that's a civic duty. That's a birthright. That's something that we should not, having lost it or having not had it for so long as African Americans, we should not void that very important birthright and right. And all of us should work to the very end, not to have our votes oppressed or suppressed or eliminated. And we are going to be doing that, but it's got to be that individual that says, I'm not going to have my vote denied. Get to one polling place and that's not where you're supposed to be. Don't go home. Right. Keep on going to a polling place, because all of this is going to happen in 2020 November. And we're going to have to be individual soldiers of one in all of our places across America. We're going to have to say, my vote is not going to be denied. So thank you all very, very much for allowing us to be here.
Thank you. Thank you, Congresswoman. All right. I think we are, Melanie. Yes, thank you. Thank you. We know we were managing time, so Melanie is expressing her gratitude. Yes, Melanie,
thank you so much. I keep trying to make sure there's no background noise. I keep talking like, thank you all so much again for joining us, and we out here on the outside. We have your back. You know, you all have ours.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So now we're going to hear from our faith leaders. We have Reverend Leslie Dwight and Reverend Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner. Please share your insight and perspective on what Black women faith leaders are doing to mobilize the Black vote, 2020 census, protests against the killing of Black men and women at the hands of police and vigilantes in the midst of Corona-19. This is so much. And civil unrest that is expanded around the world, calling for
The
justice.
Skype line. So give me 1 second. I'm just gonna call you guys. Okay?
Can you please share?
Yes, thank you so much, Melanie. You know how much I love the Black Women's Roundtable. And thank you, Dee Marshall, for always being available. You know, I love my Congressional Black Caucus women, Sheila Jackson Lee, Bonnie Watson Coleman, Karen Bass. I could go on. I feel like I'm pastoring all of them, and they are my beloveds. They are
Amen.
warrior women to the heart. You know, America's original sin is of enslaving Black people and removing Native people is still crying out for justice. All from the first slave to George Floyd, those original sins of everything we talk about underpins the original sin of systemic enslavement of people considered non-people. Therefore, the fact that someone's Black body could be shot in the night in their bed or under a neck for 9 minutes, this is not human. And that's what we're talking about. How do we have the full humanity of Black Americans unquestionably at the forefront of everyone in America? Everything we talk about underpins it. I am so grateful to be the co-convener of the National African American Clergy Network. And we are working in 2 very specific ways. First, on the vote in 7 states of Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, Michigan, North Carolina, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. And what are we doing there? Working with Black women pastors, Bishop Vashti McKenzie, Cynthia Hale, so many others, younger pastors. We are mobilizing and recruiting pastors and church-based lawyers to be equipped by the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights in what we call Turnout Sunday, lawyers and collars. Turnout is what we've always used Sunday for to get ready for Tuesday, and lawyers and collars means clergy in their collars hooked up with lawyers are going to be out there where people are having their votes suppressed. They're not backing up. So they're going to be trained. And they have been. We've been in virtual meetings since COVID started, but before that in prayer breakfast. We are excited to see how pastors are taking this to their Sunday town hall, their virtual town hall Sunday session. They're taking the word of God about justice seriously. They're preaching salvation and they're preaching social justice. They're taking it to their Bible studies. So we're excited to their women's retreats, all virtual right now. So I'm excited about that. We're doing webinars from August through October to get people ready for how do you identify voter suppression, and then what do you do about it in real time? And finally, putting together a real-time clergy response on election day. So we've been working on this for quite a while. Normally we wait a long time, but we couldn't afford to. And I am so grateful to announce that we know that this is not going to happen without our young pastors. So we have hooked up with our partner, Dee Marshall, so that we're going virtual. We're going to be able to get a multi-generational hookup of pastors and their lawyers. We have never done this before. It is so thrilling. Sheila Jackson Lee, I wish we were in Texas because Texas is one of the 6 states, by the way, that if Black people had been registered to vote, the president never would have won. For example, in Texas, I'm sure Sheila Jackson Lee, as brilliant as she is, she already knows this, but the president only won by 204,000 votes, but there were 758,000 unregistered African Americans. In Florida, 112,000 he only won by, but there were 336,000 unregistered. Look at Michigan. He only won by 11,000. There were 240,000. So the work to be done, and I could say the same thing in Georgia, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania. So the work to be done is that we gotta work on registering those 8 million unregistered African Americans. We have until early October. There ought to be right now virtual meetings, and we're doing them. People talk about turning out the votes. You gotta get people registered. We left too many votes on the table. Young people have to understand what's at stake. You can't talk to them about civil rights. You can talk to them about Michael Brown, Trayvon Martin, or George Floyd, and they get it. So I'm grateful to connect with young, progressive, outstanding leaders like D. Marshall so that we'll have a comprehensive plan of action. On the census, I'm extremely, and of course we have a Turnout Sunday toolkit, which is on our website at skinnerleaders.org, skinnerleaders.org, and you can pull that down. The second thing we're working on, I am so glad, Melanie, is on the census. When we started working in December on the census, people looked at us like we were crazy, like that's 10 years away, we don't need to think about that. $800 billion is on the table for school lunches, for healthcare, for jobs, for all the issues that plague our community. So we put together, with the help of Bishop Vashti McKenzie and Dr. Cynthia Hale, Dr. T.D. Jakes, and others, a census toolkit that tells people exactly how much their state lost in 2010 by not being counted and how many people were uncounted by states. So we've done virtual census. We are now doing virtual census briefings for pastors. And I'm telling you, the pastors are so excited to get that information. And finally, one of the things I will leave you with is that all you need to really tell people is one thing, is 3 ways to be counted. If you don't do anything else, you tell them there are 3 ways to be counted. Yep. And you tell them that it's either online, by going online to my2020census.gov. They don't even have to have the mailing that came from the Census Bureau. All they have to do is go online and verify who they are at my2020census.gov. Even better, they can call 1-844-330-2020, 1-844-330-2020, or of course they can do it by mail. But the bottom line, we've sent this to thousands of pastors around the country who now can preach about it, teach about it, along with the toolkit. They can take those scriptures and talk about if Jesus was counted in his family, you too can be counted. So we're raising it to a level of the spirit. Yes. So I'm thrilled to say that we have work to do, but I'm really excited about how churches, Black church leaders ought to be saluted as heroes every day. They not only had to deal with their churches being closed, many of them are not used to doing church virtually. They had to encounter COVID, all of the crisis of that, 2020 census and the election in 1 year, and they have not missed a beat. God bless them, and God bless all of you.
Thank you, Dr. Skinner.
Dee, can I say something?
Sure, absolutely.
Hot off the press, the 3 officers involved in George Floyd's arrest were charged with abetting Derek Chauvin, whose charge was raised to 2nd-degree murder.
Wow, yes.
Praise God.
Praise
justice,
God.
We may get justice yet.
Praise God, but see what it takes, staying in the streets.
It does.
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Melanie, and thank you, D. Marshall.
Yes, absolutely. Wow, that's good news. I'm gonna go over to Reverend Dwight, but we've been saying, how do you?
Can we just pause on that?
Yes, and let's praise God for that. Let's not overlook that.
We got folks on here.
Have been praying.
We got a young lady coming on. And
yes, let's praise.
I see her in the queue. Some of these young sisters.
I didn't want to interrupt. Thank you, Bonnie.
Camara, Hudson
Yeah.
and Tamika Mallory and so many
Yeah.
others.
Yes,
Putting
absolutely.
their bodies on the line. So we
Yes, and our white allies and young people all over and now in
high school kids
all over the world,
Yeah.
all over the world are looking.
Young people are our frontline first responders.
Yes,
They are
are.
frontline workers. They are the front line, and they are essential workers.
Okay.
And I have said, and you're right, let's pause in this moment because, you know, the 4 things that needed to happen, because somebody asked me, I said, we need, number 1, boots on the ground. We needed all of the foot soldiers who are on the ground and not coming home until justice was served. They said, listen, our ancestors protested peacefully, but we're a different bunch.
And I want to lift up our brother Keith Ellison, who's
Yes.
Attorney General.
Absolutely.
Yes, if I might.
Reverend Sharpton and so many others. I call them the National Action Network, who's been doing this forever, and all of our civil rights colleagues, you know,
and the attorney and Crump.
And this is in this movement, and these protests have been quote unquote legalist, but I don't like that word. Oh, it's legalist. No, every person that stepped out there on those streets and laid their bodies down is a leader.
That's right.
And Melanie,
the thing is transformation.
And Melanie Sheila's
this is
over
a
here.
hallelujah moment. This is a hallelujah moment.
Yeah. Congresswoman Jackson Lee.
Yeah, I just want to say, remember what I said about
has begun.
I said about mamas, but in any event, we need to publicly and everybody sing it from the rooftops. We stand in solidarity.
Yes.
I know many of you have marched or been somewhere, and I have done so, been somewhere marching.
My God.
Dr. King talked about the word called riot, but he was talking about it in his context, but he was not talking about it negatively. He said, you got to understand people who are out there.
Yeah.
They're out there because they're speaking for the voices who cannot be heard. So I want everybody to know that we're in solidarity with those protesters. We certainly want them to be safe and nonviolent, but we're in solidarity. And you're right, the outstanding legal team, Reverend Dr. Al Sharpton, I'm putting that in, he's our mutual collective friend who's been using his power always to be an agent of change. And we've just got to push forward. Remember, charging is not conviction.
It's not a conviction.
It's not the end of the story. It may be the beginning. And certainly Keith Ellison is a friend. And he said he needed us to stand with him. He's not a miracle worker, but he's going to do his very, very best. Attorney General Ellison, we understand that. And yes, we will be your armor bearers. And thank you. We just need to keep praying for justice to be done. And that justice, I don't know why when we say justice and then it comes out the other way. And I know in my legal language, there's due process and there's all that, but why aren't there justice for the victims like us or like this family? That has to happen. So justice that is really justice. Thank you all.
Amen.
Our audio is off.
All right. All right. Well, speaking of justice, and I thank you, Melanie, for even slowing us down so that we could pause and just really be present with the moment, because there is a reckoning, there is a shift. I believe in, systemic change is going to come as a result. This work is so powerful. And what I love is that there's work at many levels. There's boots on the ground, and then there's the level of dismantling systemic racism, which is, the Congresswoman here, and Dr. Skinner teaches about that, because not all of us understood, we need people on the front line, and then we need to vote and complete the census and to really tackle the systemic level. And then there's the third is the economic level. There are even celebrities that are calling for blackout days, so because they know how the money moves. And so there's a money movement and a protesting economically. And then I think the fourth, at least how I see it in my head, is then the faith leaders is just really having churches to really, because they have access to our people through that level, that they play a role. And I just love how all of this fits together. And so, but that said, Reverend Dwight, you know this work all too well. This is what you do, social justice. So while we have a question for you, I feel like I just want you to respond and just come in here before we ask our question. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being patient, but this is your space. What do you have to share before we get into the specific question?
You know, so first
Did we
of
lose
all,
her?
no, I'm here. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay,
Yes.
I can.
Okay, so thank you guys so much for having me. Thank you, Melanie, for having me in this space. And you know, can I just be authentic in this space and just say that I feel a sigh of relief. And I understand that justice has begun and it's not finished, but I'm one of those people who people told me when the charge came out, and I was like, 3rd degree murder. And I was like, I realize I'm not a lawyer, right? But that seemed a little bit familiar when we think about the victimization of the Black community. Every time this happens, we have to fight to get a charge, and then the charges seem to be less than what it doesn't seem to measure up with the crime. Right. And so when I asked the question, well, why aren't we looking at 1st degree murder or 2nd degree murder? I was told that there wasn't enough evidence to get him, that situations like that wasn't warranted. And the best that we could hope for in a situation like that was 3rd degree murder. And the reason that was important was because when you look at the amount of time that's associated with that he was only going to be able to get a maximum of 25 years for taking somebody's life. And we know that he wasn't going to get the maximum. That was an insult to injury. And so in this space, I'm personally feeling a little vindicated when people can come on board, and when those who actually operate in that space can say, yeah, nah, there is more to this than that. And we can charge, we can actually pursue justice in its purest form. And so I feel relieved, at least that we are on course to see it through to the end. So thank you for letting me let that out.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so we did want to talk also about coronavirus. And let me just back up. So for those of you who may or may not know, Reverend Leslie Dwight, she is a social justice minister for Community of Hope AME Church in Temple Hills, Maryland. And so I really want you to share also with us what has been the greatest coronavirus relief needs for Black communities in the DMV area. Just wanted to back up to COVID-19, considering the fact that we were hit the hardest. So can you talk a little bit about that and how COH and other Black churches are responding to the needs, as well as helping to get out the Black vote and census count in 2020?
Yeah, absolutely. So the needs are many. But the way that I can at least begin this conversation is just summarizing it by saying that when we kind of take a look across the board about the impact of COVID-19 on the Black community, ultimately, like what we're seeing is that in the midst of a pandemic, that it's our people who are being isolated from the resources that they need to prepare for and respond to this public health emergency. Right. So if you think about it, one of the things that happened nationally, it went out that, oh, you don't need a mask. You don't need a mask. Well, then when they changed their mind and said you needed a mask was nowhere to be found. And that becomes important when you start to digest who's showing up on the front lines as essential workers. It's our people who are showing up on the front lines as essential workers, and they did not have the resources to be able to protect themselves. We found that our people were the ones that were the postal workers and the delivery workers. They were our people who were the retail workers and the food service workers, and yet they were showing up in positions where they were not protected and yet most likely to be exposed to the virus. How cruel is that? So when we begin to talk about how did COH respond, COH responded by helping protect our people. So last Sunday, we just did a public drive where we handed out masks and we handed out toilet paper because that's still a commodity, a hard to find commodity in our community. And we didn't just do it last Sunday, but we've been doing it Sunday after Sunday after Sunday after Sunday. We can't change the healthcare system. We can't change the economic system, but we can do what we can to make sure that our people have the basic protection equipment as they go out to try to take care of their families. The other thing that we found when looking at the impact of COVID-19 on our communities is that it put a magnifying glass on some of the issues that were already plaguing prevailing issues in our community. And one of those issues in the DMV, we have pockets of communities that are impacted by food deserts. So we were already doing work trying to make sure that our people in our community were fed, and we had to up the ante in that area. And so what we did was we continued to provide groceries for the community, but then we added a component where we were able to go out every week and provide hot meals to those who were in the community to make sure that we were addressing an exacerbated situation. And one of the ways that we were able to do that was by leveraging public-private partnerships. And so we were able to expand the number of people that we serve, and we were able to increase the frequency of the people that are served in the community to try to deal with an exacerbated issue. The other thing that we could not lose sight of were the vulnerable populations that exist within our community. So when we talk about the homeless community and we talk about those who were recovering drug addicts, we partnered with community organizations to make sure that they were not overlooked and that they were not forgotten about, and we made sure that their needs were met as well. When we looked at our Title I schools, we made sure that we reached out to those parents and that we gave them food cards to make sure that their households did not go hungry. So you have to look at it from what were already the prevailing issues in our community, and then how was it exacerbated by it, and who is it that we need to focus on in this season. The last thing that I'll bring up as a way that we assessed impact of COVID-19, and it was a great partnership that we've had with the Black Women's Roundtable, is that when things shut down, our government shut down our transportation, a lot of our transportation systems. And so we had essential workers who were relying on public transportation to get to work that now had to pick up an added expense, an increased added expense to figure out how to get to work every day. And that becomes, there's a tension there between, do I use my money to go to work or do I use my money to put food on my table? And so through this partnership, we were able to break down that transportation barrier. We were able to provide resources so that essential workers could get to work. We didn't forget about our seniors that are suffering, that may be homebound and suffering from social isolation, provided transportation so that their family caregivers can get with them and connect with them and help them get the essential services that we need. And so that's how we began to, even with our doors shut, our hands worked and our feet were moving, and that's the way we were able to reach the people. And so to address the last piece of your question, where you begin to talk about the impact of Census 2020 and making sure that our vote counts. I think that never before have we seen a time where the times have made acting or engaging civically more relevant to the populations that we are serving. I think that we were able to have candid conversations with folks based off of their real life experience. Like once they met a need, we can tell you how being able to feed you and being able to provide services, direct services ties to your participation in the census. In addition to that, when we were packaging meals and sending out groceries, we were putting out information in census cards and letting people know how to engage in the census, what the different methodologies were. In addition to that, we didn't forget about people who were being sheltered in place, right? Yeah. And so there were a number of virtual events that we did. There were video montages that we put out that at the end of the day, it lifted the message that your voice matters, your vote matters. Here's how you engage. And again, lifting up the relevancy of the times and connecting it with their civic participation. So I hope that
Thank you, Reverend Dwight. I'm going to move over to the Honorable Sheila Tyson. I so appreciate you, Reverend Dwight. That was so comprehensive in terms of just helping us to understand where we are or where, what the experiences have been. Honorable Sheila Tyson, I see you here. And I want to make sure we get you in. I know you're making some adjustments on the background. But I want to just say this, Commissioner Tyson. Okay, we can hear you. So you're good to go. We're ready to rock.
Yes, ma'am. We're good.
All right. We know you're running. We know you're busy. We know you are, listen, we know you are boots on the ground, fighting a battle there in Alabama. So we so appreciate you making the time. So I just want to say, as county commissioner in Jefferson County, Alabama, just so people know where you are from, as convener of the Alabama Black Women's Roundtable, we know you are on the front lines. We know providing COVID-19 relief to the residents of your county, especially underserved communities. Can you share with us how Corona or COVID-19 has impacted African Americans who are dying at higher rates than any other group? Can you talk a little bit about that? I know we have another panel starting in just a few minutes, but we want to hear from you.
Yes, here in Jefferson County, it's really a strange animal here in the state of Alabama. You know, we have always felt like we was in a COVID-19 situation here in this state because it is one of the Southern's poorest states. Well, so when COVID-19 hit, you know, we were already in a state of emergency. Mm. So we just beefed up everything that we were doing already. So we end up having to, you know, prepare to give more food out. We had to cover the whole county. Mm. So when you start looking at that, you had to try to cover the 40 counties within the state of Alabama. Wow. So we had to try to cover the Black Belt part. We was trying to cover Talladega, Selma, Dallas County, you know, just trying to make sure we hit the population that really needs it. Right now, we have several testing locations. We are in the Black Belt. We are in all of the low income areas. We are trying to make sure we assist the people who are filing for unemployment, and also trying to make sure that they are filing it right, to where they can get their unemployment, you know. And it's a such thing as this pandemic. You can come up in this pandemic because a lot of them are going to get more unemployment than they were when they was making, because don't forget, we are in the state of Alabama. This is one of the lowest minimum wages that most people make, the $7.50 an hour. So we have a lot of service workers that work out of this state. So we are just trying to make sure we can fit in the gap for the people when they need us. And we have gotten thousands and thousands and thousands of calls. We are able to meet the need. We are just trying to work every corner we can. I'm not here by myself doing the work. We have Letitia Daniel Jackson is working the southern part of Jefferson, of the state of Alabama, with the Black Women's Roundtable. So we have other agencies that we have partnered with. So we are just we had 16 testing sites today throughout the state. So we're moving and we're doing the best we can.
Well, we appreciate your what you are doing, and we know that you're doing more than the best by our people and communities of color, Black people, and we're grateful that you are there. So I have, let's see, Melanie, I know we're managing for time, but I know we had another question perhaps for the commissioner, but I want to check in with you. How are we on time?
Can we just ask that last question for everybody?
Okay.
And thank you, Sheila, and thank you, everybody.
Yep, so we'll go.
We promised everybody we would start on time and end on time, because
yes,
everybody's doing 10 things.
Yeah, so for all panelists, I think we're gonna go to this last question. Right, so.
And you don't have to answer, but we're gonna ask.
Yeah, we'll ask, so whoever wants to chime in, ladies. So as Black leaders, you have broken many racial and gender glass ceilings in the political arena, faith community, and more. We believe you have publicly made it known you believe presidential candidate Joe Biden, the presumptive Democratic presidential nominee, should select a Black woman as his VP, as his vice president running mate. Why do you believe it is time for a Black woman to become the first woman VP? Whoever wants to answer.
Now, I can answer that.
Take off my tax exempt hat for just a quick second as I depart and say, this is me as a taxpayer and individual speaking. Why not a Black woman? Brilliant, science, math, all the areas in the world we have mastered. We have done all that it takes. We have people at the highest level who have run major corporations, major institutions. We're overqualified. We're more than prepared. So why not a Black woman? Don't call us your firewall if you're not willing to make us your partner. That's what I say.
Thank you, Dr. Skinner. Commissioner Tyson?
Yes, I totally agree with Dr. Skinner. You know, it's just like looking for a needle in a haystack, as my grandmama used to say. It's there. It's in your hand. This is the opportunity, I feel like, for a Black woman to help save the world, because we do need saving. We have never been in this state of crisis. We are in a state of emergency in this country.
Yes.
And who else can save us besides a Black woman?
Ooh.
We have saved through history. We have saved our husbands, our children. We have saved the master's wives from the master. So why not a Black woman? We are here to serve, and we can do the job.
Amen. And the church said,
amen.
Amen.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, Melanie. So I
Thank
think
you.
I think we are rounding out. We thank you so much. We wanted to keep it tight for this virtual town hall because we know you all are out in the field, whether you are working from home, just doing important work for our community. So we are so grateful for you, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, Congresswoman Karen Bass, Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman, the Reverend Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner, Reverend Leslie Dwight, as well as the Commissioner Sheila Tyson, and to Melanie Campbell for really allowing for this platform.
Yes.
Also for always creating the power table. Melanie Campbell is by far the woman. I've seen her on both sides. She is a trusted gatekeeper as the voice for Black women on both sides of our communities, and elected officials and government officials at the highest level are constantly checking in with Melanie and the National Coalition on Black Women.
Not a gatekeeper though.
Well, okay, okay. She, she's so humble. We'll say she is a trusted voice. She is a trusted voice, and we trust her, and they trust her. And so we are grateful for you in hosting this platform. This concludes the first panel. And before I go, I will say, if you have just joined in, this is Count Black Women and Families Unity 2020 week. Black Women's Power Table virtual town hall series, and we are talking about the power of the Black women's vote, Census 2020 and protests, moving Black women's justice agenda forward in 2020 in the midst of Corona-19 pandemic and civil unrest. My name is E.C. Marshall, and I'm going to bow out for Melanie Campbell, who is the president and CEO of the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation. She is the national convener of the Black Women's Roundtable. Melanie Campbell.
Thank you, Dee. Can we just do this for Dee? Say thank you, sister. Thank you, all of our first panel. And I so wonderful to look on the screen. All these powerful sisters this on here, and it's kind of on wrap. It's like, okay, pass the power baton. So power table talk 2. All right now. Y'all ready, ladies? Y'all ready, audience?
But you know what?
Was awesome.
Melanie, before we back out, feel free to take a photo and you all tweet and post and engage, because this is a power table. This is a virtual power table, so we'd appreciate it. So feel free to take a virtual or take a photo of your panel and feel free to share on your platforms, because it will help amplify the work of the census and the week of the coalition, and continue the efforts. I think, that would be Holiday's announcement in terms of housekeeping and logistics. So I'm going to back out here, and take care, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dee. Thank you again. And thank you, ladies. We're going to go right into power table number 2. I want to thank all of our panelists. And rather than just go through introductions, when I call on you, I will introduce you just for the sake of time. And I want to take a pause though and thank Roland Martin with Roland Martin Unfiltered, who was our media partner, who no matter when we call, he responds for being our media partner. So this conversation is going beyond these boxes that we see here to thousands of Black folks across this country. We thank him for having the vision to create Roland Martin Unfiltered, and for the ability to also be a leader and a servant leader and share that platform to help make sure our people get the kind of information they need. So I'm going to go right into, and ladies that are on this on-wrap now, we did take a pause because we heard of the news that under the leadership of our brother Keith Ellison, who's the state attorney general in the state of Minnesota, that they are charging the other 3 police officers. So we took a pause to just sit in that and know that that's just, and lifted up our young people and our civil rights organizations who are on the front lines of doing this work. Some that are on this, that were on the last table, and those of you all that are on here now, and many, many more. And we know that it ain't over. We've seen people get indicted before. So we have to keep praying and keep fighting and keep resisting. So when first, our first leader, who is my mentor, when I came to this town 25 years ago, she took me as part of her crew, sister crew, and mentored me through the finding ways to not just be in this town, but try to make a difference in this town. And so I thank her for that leadership and for her sisterhood. She just happened to also be a Delta woman, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. So Mrs. Cora Masters-Berry, many of folks know you as the former First Lady of the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. Many folks know you as one of the consummate political scientists and strategists in this country. You have a whole lot of folks get elected, including our Mayor for Life, Marion Barry, who joined the Ancestors a few years ago. We know you're a historian. We know you're an organizer and an activist. We know you're a mother and a grandma, and so much, much, much more. We know you run and you've been mentoring with the Southeast Tennyson Learning Center. You just don't ever, I don't know how you get rest. Because if I call you early, you answer. If I call you late, you answer, you know? So I thank you for that when I have this moment and opportunity. So what I want to do, Cora, is to help us to set the tone, set the framing for this conversation. Mention the fact that we know that that history is a great teacher if we allow ourselves to learn from it and know it. We know that the unjust killing of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and many, many others who were unjustly killed by the police and vigilantes. We know white nationalism and white supremacy and the killing of our folks has gone on since they brought us over here on slave ships. And policing has never really was always about keeping us in check, right? So law enforcement has never, and I've got folks that we all know that are great police officers, but the system, and we're talking about systemic racism and systemic problems, have always been. We also know that movements start in the midst of all of that. And we know that those deaths that I mentioned, those who were killed, have had, especially the last one with George Floyd, sparked a new moment for racial justice, police reform, and so much more. And I know you've lived through that various movements, and we were on the phone and talking about it, and make me go back and I think I know, I go back and go, let me just check on that because I didn't quite know this or that. Just share some knowledge to put a frame to this conversation as we move to discuss this current moment with so many powerful sisters that are on the ground nationally and in states, just getting it done to make sure our people can not just survive, but we can thrive. So can you frame this conversation for us, please?
Well, thank you, Melanie, and thank you for having me. And it's called to the sisters. I'm glad to be on this call with you. You know, it's so interesting. Can you frame this conversation for us, please? Can you hear me? Well, thank you, Melanie, and thank you for having me. And it's called to the sisters. I'm glad to be on this call with you.
It's Cora, it's echoing back for some reason. Holly, and then if everybody put your phones on or things on mute till you speak, then maybe that'll help.
Can you see me?
Yeah, we can see you and hear you. It's an echo. I'm gonna put mine on mute. Maybe that'll help.
Okay, is it echoing now? No, it doesn't sound like it. Okay, well, it's so interesting because it's just so many things running around in my head. My mother used to always say, and I'm sure everybody else's mother said, there's nothing new under the sun. I never understood that when I was a child, but as I lived through this life and I see all this going on, it's all repetition. It's so interesting. Right before this call, as a matter of fact, I was a little late on the call because the county executive for Prince George's County, Angela Alsobrooks, called me. And we were just having the conversation everybody is having. And some kind of way we started talking about why this movement, why this is being like it is, as opposed to the other, why is this going to be different? Now, she'd already said that policing was changing. That's going to never be the same again. That's going to change. And she asked me, why did I think that was the case in terms of why this would be different? I said, it's not just this. It was a combination of the pandemic and then the shutdown, and then the shutdown, and then the depression, and then the uprising. So it was all of these things that came together. But the most important thing that makes it different is that actually this movement is at least 50% white, and it's white young people. And when you look at some of these movements and some of these in these cities, and I did, and I noticed that women and men my age were in the back of the crowd because they didn't want to get trampled, but they were there. So somebody said, why are the old people there? And I consider myself old. I just turned 75, so I've been 25 3 times. So everybody give me a hand on that. I said, because those people, we were the baby boomers. We're the ones who turned this country upside down in the 60s. And I was talking to her about it, and she said to me, and I was talking about the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement. And you know what she said? She said, I never knew there was a difference. I never knew that there were two separate things. I never heard them being discussed as two separate things. And I said, the difference between the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement was the civil rights movement was trying to right the wrongs of segregation, and the Black Power movement was trying to tell us to love ourselves. So that stayed with us. And I used to argue with my husband about it all the time because, you know, he was civil rights, I was Black Power. And I said to him, the ravages of the results and the benefits of the civil rights movement have been little by little chipped away, but nobody can take love of self. You pass that on to generations and to your children. So I'm just simply saying that what's going on now is a reflection of what I didn't even think I would live through 2 revolutions. My daughter called me and said, Mom, you're living through 2 revolutions. I said, absolutely, I did not. I thought we had done our work. I mean, I know there's a lot of work to be done, but this, an uprising, and it's simply because you have to stay vigilant. Everything that we had accomplished in the 60s and 70s, little by little have been chipped away, chipped away, chipped away, chipped away. And so you have to, and we were not, for 30, 40 years, we slept. We just were satisfied with the little bit over here and the little bit over there. And then we got ourselves a Black president, hallelujah. And we have been treated as if now the proverbial, you know that expression, standing in the schoolhouse door, that was a reflection of George Wallace, not, you know, allowing integration into the schools. Now we have a proverbial new statement saying, as I told one of my white friends, I said, you have your knee on the neck of Black people, we need to breathe. So this is, it's just boiling over because there's a whole generation of white kids who don't see color. And the funny thing about it, they don't even see gender. So when they get out here and see these injustices, they don't see that as somebody else. They see it as them. So there's a lot of things going on here that happened there, because I told her, and this is not different, in the civil rights movement, do you know really what triggered the 65 Voting Rights Act? It wasn't the Patterson Bridge, it was the death of white people. When that woman, Louisa, got killed and the preacher got killed, the white preacher, that is when they started paying attention. And that is why Black people are not lying in the streets now with bloody heads, with dogs and all, because, not because they are so refrained, it's because it's the front line is who? It's the white people. They're out there and they're scared to beat them because they know there will be tremendous repercussions from it. So we are being supported and allied with white people, but that's like Tamika Mallory said, is we welcome you in the movement, but don't be in front of us. You just have to do what we tell you to do. So all I'm saying is what happened in the 60s, this is a replay of it. The difference is, as I told you, Melanie, everybody says when this is over with, then what's going to happen? And I said, you don't have to do anything. All you have to do is go back to, and this is what shocks people, go back to the playbook of Lyndon Baines Johnson. When he got 64 Civil Rights Act and the 65 Voting Rights Act passed, he then executed it. And he said, and I quote, "I can't do nothing about the wrongs of the past. We all did bad things, but I can fix what goes on in the future." And he executed a plan called the Great Society. That is the reason that me and most of the people my age group were able to go to college, were able to get into these schools, were able to get these jobs. That's where affirmative action came from. The playbook is there. We just got to pull it back out and know that there's nothing, and I told this to someone else, and they were talking to me about another white leader, and I said, there's nothing better than a reformed racist. Now, they can do a lot for you, and he did. And so all of those things are there with us. And so what I'm saying is that while they are protesting, and I don't call it a protest, I call it an uprising. You know, people just tired. They're just having an uprising, good old Christmas Adams uprising going on up out here. Get ready for the plan. Get ready for the movement, because we're not going back. It's not going to be like Freddie and all the rest of them, Castile and Gardner. This is going to move us forward. And the main reason I want you to pay attention to, every time a white commentator talks about it, they start with the systemic racism. That has never come out of their mouth in all of these years. Have you paid attention to that? Systemic racism. So they know what that means. That means you got to unroot what's going on from the bottom up. You can't swindle dress. You can't give us a few, accolades, give us some money over here at this city, and then we go. You got to change stuff from the bottom. So that's what I see, and I've been studying it and paying attention to it, praying, of course, and I just want to give a shout out to our sister Tamika. She said it all for us, and we have a voice that we can all support. And what I'm going to urge all of you to do, and that they did back in the 60s, we had leaders. We had Martin Luther King, we had Stokely Carmichael, of course, we had my husband, we had all those leaders, but they were poor and they struggled. And to help us, they struggled. And it was people like Harry Belafonte and different people like that gave money to support King and all of those. So I'm saying to you, as we watch our leaders out there, let's not just sit back and clap. Let's get on the internet and give money to Until Freedom. Give money to the National Coalition. We have to take care of our own, because if we don't, the other people will come in, they will finance us, and then we have to answer to them. So if we take care of our own, then we can be free to speak truth to power and hold people accountable. So that's my last word on that topic. Take care of our own people as they, like you, Melanie, are out here on the front line. And know that ain't nothing new under the sun. All this has been done again. It's a rerun. It's just got a different little title to it. It's called Take Your Proverbial Knee Off Our Neck So We Can Breathe. That's another word for systemic racism.
Thank you, Cora. Thank you. Ain't nothing new under the sun. And we all have our dash. Question you have to ask yourself. I always talk, what do you want to see on the other side of that dash? What do you want to remember you by? What did you get done during your dash? So we're going to move to our panelists. And I think Tamika was going to be on the panel, but her flight was getting back and forth. And I think she taped something, Holly. So I'm going to let it there because if she's not on yet, that means her flight stuff got a little crossed up. So would you play that if you can? Is that up in the queue?
Yep.
Okay,
It's
thank
in
you.
the queue. Give me 1 second. Hey family, it's Tamika Mallory, and I am on a plane right now, headed to New York City from Houston, Texas, where over 70,000 people marched on behalf of George Floyd. And we just saw that the officers, all the officers involved in his murder have been charged. And in fact, the one officer, the first officer, Chauvin, his charges has been increased. And so I just wanted to come and say that the protests do work. The work that folks are doing on the ground across this country is so important. People have to stay excited, people have to stay ignited, and people have to stay engaged. And being a part of Black Women's Roundtable and able to have these conversations about the critical need for our work to intersect is so important. And I feel like we've got to march our way through a few streets. First, we've got to stop on the Census Street and make sure that as we're marching for justice, we're also being counted. And we've got to march all the way to the polls in November. So we've got to be registering our people. And we just have to do the real work, the work that all of you are already engaged in, but let's turn it up a notch so that these protests will not be just protests, that they would be in line with the greater mission. And that is that we, the people, demand change, and we demand that this country respect us and respect Black sanctity. And so I'm happy to be a part of such a great collective under the leadership of my big sis, Melanie Campbell, and my mentor, Cora Masters-Berry, and all of you who are participating in this important forum today. Love you all. We're going to keep fighting, and let's not let up. Let's not let up. I'm out here looking like who did it and ran. I need to pull it all together, but I would say that it's a good feeling to know that all of it, all the sacrifices we're making is for good. Peace and love.
Thank you, thank you. This is good to see our sister. And the technology blows my mind. She said, "Oh, I'll just put it on a tape." And how are you gonna do all that? WhatsApp. I know about WhatsApp now. Cora, y'all know. We got to get to WhatsApp. So Holly took care of that for us. So we're just gonna lift up our sister. And I know she's on that plane, and we got to be everywhere. Technology is wonderful, and just some pause and lift up Tamika for what she's doing out there. And we know she was trained by some of the best. So I'm gonna call on, in this order, my sister Trudy Lucas from National, who's with, let me get the titles. I'm so sorry, y'all. We've got Trudy Lucas, Manager, Religious Affairs and External Relations, National African American Clergy Network. We've got our sister Latasha Brown, co-founder, Black Voters Matter. We've got Reverend Dr. Judith C. Moore, founder of Sisters Saving Ourselves Now, convener of the Pittsburgh, Mon Valley Black Women's Roundtable, who I'm gonna just put it out there, also my big sister and my sorority sister on this call. We've got Holly Holiday, Esquire National Campaign Manager, Unity 20 Campaign at the National Coalition. And last and certainly not least, we have Kamara Hudson, who is at New York University law student, and also is an alumni member of Black You Vote, who's been on the ground right here in our nation's capital. So I'm going to ask you all this question. So it'll be Trudy, Latasha, Judy, Kamara, and Holly, and you all can answer the question. But I'll start off with Trudy. And I mentioned that we know you all have been on the front lines, whether you be in the protests, or you've been organizing to get the vote out, or you've been organizing to get the census out, or you've been developing Black women's power tables of your own, and developing solutions forums, and doing a whole lot of work, and taking care of folks with Corona, and doing the work. So we know. So can you share what your organization is doing, right? And to bring about the transformational social change that we're talking about, whether that's on a national level or whether that's in local communities. So Trudy, start us off.
Thank you so much, Melanie. You know how much I appreciate and love you for all that you do. I'd also like to tell Sister Barry, we have a mutual friend. Well, actually, Dave Rivers, he is supposed to be a cousin. I'm in Charlotte, South Carolina. So I just wanted to bring greetings from him to you and just to thank you for all that you do. Of course, I work for the National Action Network under the leadership of Reverend Al Sharpton, who has probably the biggest voice now in civil community. So you know about the things that we do nationally. There are some things behind the scene that you may not know. You may not know that at this point we have reached over 500,000 meals that we have given out from Harlem to Bronx, LA to South Carolina to Miami. So we are at 500,000 meals distributed in those areas. Those are some of the things behind the scenes. Some of the other things that we're doing as we're speaking with the FCC to make sure that our small churches, our rural areas have broadband, because without that, where we are in our community, where we are in a nation, if you don't have access to internet and broadband, you're missing a whole lot. So those are some of the things that we are doing nationally. For our local organization, I'm in the Religious Affairs Department in Charleston, South Carolina, that's under the leadership of Reverend Nelson B. Rivers III, who also is my pastor, who continues to do great work. One of the things that we have done is we have fought for COVID testing in our area and also in the rural areas of South Carolina. We actually had over 3,000 people tested for the COVID in Charleston, South Carolina and North Charleston. So we were excited about doing that partnership with our local Franklin C. Fetter. Also, we're now talking with DHEC to cover the Black Belt, some of the blackest areas in South Carolina, Clarendon County, Bamberg, Denmark, places that may not have an opportunity to get the COVID testing. So we are working on that. Those are some of the things that we're doing, and we're on the front line. We're engaging our faith community. Most of the testing have been done in partnership with churches throughout South Carolina. So we're engaging our faith community, and we're just thankful that we have the opportunity and the voice and the integrity and trust that people have faith that we're going to do what we say that we're going to do. So those are just some of the things that we're working on. We're keeping our hands to the plow. And I'm just excited to have this conversation with these brilliant, beautiful women at the Black Women's Roundtable. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Trudy. Well, you know, we're down in South Carolina, what was that, February?
Absolutely.
Right? For the primary. And we know Black women turned out. We was also down there and helping to push, and we're still working on that, for pushing for universal paid family leave.
That's right, absolutely.
Thank you for taking the leadership on that.
Not a problem.
As well, and we know that you are a go-to, right? Also for so many, and looking forward to building out BWR down in South Carolina.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All you do. Sister Latasha Brown down there in the ATL, I think. Tell us what's going on with Black Voters Matter, and then it'll be queuing up, getting ready for Reverend Dr. Moore right after her. Go ahead, Latasha.
We who believe in freedom cannot rest. Oh, we who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. I just wanted to start in the spirit. I am in Atlanta, hot Atlanta, and I mean it's hot, y'all. I'm very grateful for being a part of this conversation. Melanie, thank you, sister, for your leadership, Thank you for your mentorship, and thank you for your support over the years. You know, you are not new to this game, you true to this game. You have supported many of us on the ground that have been leading this work for years. And so I just want to lift you up and say how grateful I am for you and your leadership and your vision and pulling us together. And so Black Voters Matter, I'll just kind of highlight, we've kind of put our work in 3 buckets that we're seeing right now. One, being a good organizer, you've got to meet the needs of what the community has now. Like, it's not about what your program is what the community, what you need. And so the 3 buckets of our work that we're doing now, one, the first work is around mutual aid and support. And so for the last couple of months, because of the coronavirus has so devastated and impacted our community, we created a Saving Ourselves initiative where we've been putting resources on the ground directly to groups, mutual aid groups and organizations, grassroots groups that are doing things from all the way to Kalamazoo, where we've been in partnership with the BWR chapter there, where they are literally on the ground providing masks and PPE and testing. We've been providing masks. We've been, some of the groups we've been supporting has been doing testing. Some of the groups we've been supporting have actually been going around feeding, doing Meals on Wheels, community style, have also been doing support to seniors in our community. So one part of our work has been centered around COVID-19, which is our Saving Ourselves initiative, that ultimately on the front lines, we're not just gonna let our folks suffer. Like, we got to step up, and we ain't gonna wait on the government or anybody else. Like, literally, those are our folks, those are our seniors, those are our elders. And so we've been doing that work. In addition to that, like, while we're building and supporting, we're also fighting. So we also created an alliance of several organizations with also including the Southern Rural Black Women's Initiative and the Highlander Center, where we created an alliance and pushed back on the Southern governors, did a petition, which a couple of thousand folks on the petition to really push back on Southern governors about reopening up the states prematurely, that we knew would have a devastating impact on our community. We've still been digging in and pushing and organizing around that. The second bucket of our work has really continued to be around voter protection and voter engagement and voter protection. And so we've been doing a lot of work around that. We're working in 11 states. We got teams in each of those states. We're working with at least 20 grassroots groups in each of those states that are doing voter protection and voter engagement work and census work as well. And so even today, when I'm thinking about Pennsylvania, some of the other places, we've got folk right now on the ground doing a lot of work. A lot of work we had to move to some of our digital spaces, but we've been convening, which allowed us to convene some town halls, which we've been having town halls every week. We've been having town halls for our different states. Last week we had Pennsylvania and Georgia. Actually tomorrow, Trudy, we have South Carolina, where people can actually hear from Black organizations doing work on the ground, because oftentimes the narrative is framing us as victims and not necessarily as we are driving the solutions and on the front line of driving solutions in our community. So what we do is with our town halls, we've been actually showcasing amazing work being led by Black folk in community that we're actually addressing and dealing with issues in our community. We also have been doing a legal strategy. We're in a lawsuit right now where we sued the state of Georgia around the postage, not providing postage for the absentee ballots. And we're part of the Just Georgia Coalition, which I know my sister Helen Butler down in Georgia and others, that literally we've been organizing and supporting the resistance and the demand of justice around the Ahmaud Arbery case as well. The third bucket of our work has been centered around spreading Black joy and love. That right now, this is a real traumatic experience for us, right? And so part of what winds up happening, this anger, many of us are not able to sleep. There's a lot of people, we got to be connected to our joy. And part of the reason why I started singing is because that's what our spirits, and at the end of the day, what has literally taken Black folks through is not about policy, about what white folks and convincing white folks. It has been our spirit and our drive to say, connect to our humanity and believe that we can transform the world with being in our fullness and our power. And so we've done that as well. In addition to that, as we're putting resources on the ground. And so there are Black grassroots groups in any of our states. We're providing grants that if you're doing COVID-19 work, and we also set up this week, because of the uprisings that are happening, a resistance fund, so that we're providing money for bail funds right now, particularly in communities that are marginalized or rural communities. There are protests and other things going on as well, that we're providing that as well. So we've got a lot going on. We got a lot going on. And thank you, Melanie. The part of our ability to be able to do this is the support. I will just say it. I can't praise you enough with the support that the National Coalition has provided for us, and to be a partner has certainly left a platform for us to do our work and elevate what we're doing. So thank you, sister.
Thank you. I said, thank you, Latasha. And I know you had an appointment that you stepped out of too. So, you know, we appreciate you and y'all down in hot Atlanta. And, you know, it's real, y'all out there. And I know Georgia, y'all don't have you know, these governors. That's all I'm gonna say about that, right?
That's right. I just want to tell folks, if there are Black grassroots groups that are doing either COVID-19 work, or doing resistance work like bailing people out, they can go on our website, and we're providing some mini grants. You know, we can't fund everybody, but we're trying to fund as much as we can, and particularly those areas that don't have resources. So just go on blackvotersmatterfund.org. But thank you, Melanie, and I'm really, really honored to be a part of Black Women's Roundtable.
Thank you, thank you. Dr. Moore, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Mon Valley. We know you all just had an election yesterday, and we're able to get that done. Make sure you take your thing off of mute so we can hear you.
I guess that's helpful.
Yes. So tell us I know the election was yesterday. I know last week, you know, participated in your solutions forum with Black women leaders from the Pittsburgh, Mon Valley, Allegheny County area. And we know the protests, you know, Pittsburgh been showing up, you know, on my television screen, or already at my phone screen. Half the time I'm looking down, you know, on the phone. But a lot going on, and it has had its own share of police violence. And I know you in your, even though you're not a practicing pastor, I know you were one for 25 years. In the AME church down there. So I know you've seen more death than you want to ever, and preach more funerals than you ever. And as your little sister, I know that you carried it, but you didn't stop the work, and that you continued on to do the work for justice and to empower Black women, most especially, and girls, and the kind of work that you did around and still do around single moms and all those things. So kind of, I done laid out the stuff I might have told all you stuff, but you do. But I wanted to make sure I frame that and thank you for all that you do. And just tell us what's been going on down there up there in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, we're still on the ground. Protesters are still out there. I think they're still even counting our votes. The mail-in ballots were late, but I think they're counting them now. The governor made a special permission that we count those mail-in ballots that came in late. But who can better tell our story than Pittsburgh Mon Valley Black Women Roundtable? So we are standing up, we are leading, we are making sure that our voices count. And how we're going about doing that is, first of all, COVID-19. We just came out of a Black Women Roundtable Solution Forum, where we talked with panels of Black women around the Pittsburgh Mon Valley. And one of the things that we walked away is that we need to continue to collaborate with each other, that we need to support one another. And it's a very difficult time in Pittsburgh with COVID-19, but just the protest, the unrest that is in the town, that it's chaos a little bit. It's settling down a little bit. So we thank God for that. But they are out in numbers. The farm that we had, one of the organization was Gateway Medical Society. And in that group, the president is a Black woman. And some of the things that they are doing
that we receive from the actionable steps is that they are really taking hard the COVID-19 by public awareness. They are using social media. They even started a little episode called Ask the Black Doctor. So for media spots. So we're excited about that. And I'm excited because some of the doctors that are on there were people that I knew when they were kids. So that kind of tells my age, but the fact that they're picked up the mantle and they're moving forward is an exciting time for us. Also, they started a Black COVID-19 Equity Coalition with several Black women are a part of that. And one of the things that they are doing is focusing on race, the data around race. There are no studies in Pittsburgh, Mon Valley, effects of the COVID virus on Black people. So that's one of the great things they're doing, and I'm excited also about that. And they're establishing strategies, and they're trying to make sure that testing is available in the areas where Black people live. So that's another great thing. Around census and voting, Pittsburgh, Mon Valley, we are a place, we have a large population of seniors. And of course, we have a lot of government housing, but our Black seniors are kind of stuck in place. They can't come downstairs, they can't mingle. And so it's been very, very difficult and very hard for them to kind of move forward. But what some of the grassroots organizations are doing, which I'm thankful for, and also the Lyft coupons and codes that we received to help some of our seniors to be able to get around, able to go to their doctor's appointments, even going to get groceries. So we're thankful, Melanie Campbell, for your leadership in terms of that. But what we're doing is providing transportation now to the election that'll be coming up, because where there used to be voting areas downstairs, huh, Jeremiah, that now they have to go to another location. And so organizations like the Black Magazine is also helping us with that. And Stand Up Mon Valley is also helping to make sure that we get our seniors and people who are not able to get to the ballots. They're working on making sure that they get to that. We're also working on discussing holding our political leadership accountable. We're just finding out who that is, so that's going to take a minute to kind of move forward. We also, in terms of transportation and housing, we have a big issue around that. And one of the things that we are thankful for as an organization is that we're trying to get more Black women on the boards and committees for transportation and housing. You know, if we can invest in the transportation and housing, we should have a voice at the table. So people are working together to make sure about that. We're reaching out to faith-based. We're using journalism and social media. We'll be working with community college, CCAC, and our hopes are working with other organizations like Carnegie Mellon University, who was on our Actionable Step Committee last Thursday. So we're excited about that. And then there's a final remark is that we have an organization, you know, we have a lot of cuts. People are, organizations are having a lot of cuts to their programs. But in spite of all of that, Healthy Start is still addressing health disparity around infant mortality. So this is Pittsburgh Mon Valley Black Women Roundtable. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, our Reverend Dr. Moore. And the things that you all are sharing with us as part of this focus, we have national things going on, but we want to also hear what's going on in the states and what's going on locally to help the Black Women's Roundtable with our justice agenda that we consistently evolve, so that if we can't just sit inside our beltway and think we know what's going on. So we think it's always important to hear what's happening, and then we're able to see the common threads to develop an evolving agenda as we are in this 2020 election cycle. What do our people need? So I think having that solution forum at this time was really, really very, very important as we continue to push these candidates that especially the ones who need our vote, especially need Black women to vote, that we push and leverage our power so we can move our justice agenda forward. I wanted to call on Kamara Stokes Hudson, who I've introduced as a New York University law student. Is your first year?
First year.
First year. Seems like you've been there already, I guess because of the Corona thing, right? So you're in your first year at NYU. You undergrad at University of Vermont, cold country. And but she interned with us when she was in high school at Black You Vote, and came back and always comes back every chance she gets to pay it forward with our current interns. And we thank you for your leadership. And I wanted folks to hear a little bit about what happened. I know why you've been having to be here, I guess, studying in place, or getting ready to start studying in place, and I guess go back to New York. But with all this going on, wherever we know you're going to be awesome. And you've been working. You didn't go straight to law school. I know you did a lot of social justice work, criminal justice work. Am I correct? In Connecticut, right? And did a lot of writing and research, and does research with us and working with us. And so I know you were out there, and you and your brother, and you just kind of give us a description. Tell us what happened. You've been in the protests right here in the Washington, D.C. area, inside of the nation's capital, but then also share with us your thoughts about what your generation is doing and how we can support that work.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mel, and the rest of the BWR staff for putting this together and asking me to speak. Also, thank you to Ms. Masters-Berry for that insightful and powerful introduction. And to all the speakers who came before for everything you all added to the conversation.
Just speak up a little, Kamara.
Oh, I'm sorry. And thank you all for the rest of the speakers for what you all have added to the conversation as well. So I have been, over the last week or so, supporting street level activism and supplying materials to street level protesters, but also participating in acts of civil disobedience down by the White House. I want to acknowledge, before I talk about what happened, that the right to protest is a civil liberty. It is a healthy part of a democracy, especially when you're addressing issues like police violence, where the electoral answers are not entirely clear to people always. I've been a protester in DC since I was a teenager. I was part of the group of DCPS students who walked out for justice for Trayvon Martin, and I stood outside of the White House protesting many times. My brother, who was with me during the incident I'm about to talk about, was also an organizer of protests by the White House, including organizing thousands of DCPS students to protest the racism of the current administration in 2016. I've been out or had been out for 5 nights at the protests down by the White House. And I have seen an incredibly amount of aggression from police officers towards peaceful protesters, far more than I have ever seen in my life. The past 5 nights, I've seen peaceful protesters be shot at with rubber bullets, tear gassed and maced. I myself have been shoved by officers, tear gassed. And 2 nights ago, I was forced to shelter in a Good Samaritan's home from the police for about 8 hours after the police engaged in a tactic called kettling, which is where you block off a group of people on both sides by rows of police officers and do not allow them to leave. This is an explicit violation of international human rights, kettling, and forced a group of about 100 people, many of them were children, many of them young, to shelter in a Good Samaritan's home, right? A man just opened his door and allowed us to shelter in there after the police decided to tear gas the crowd and wouldn't let anyone leave, right? People were attempting to leave after the curfew. People were attempting to go home, and they were attacked by the DC police. Very, very frankly, very, very honestly, they were attacked by the DC police. most of my work and my career has been about advancing rights for children. So I'd be remiss in failing to acknowledge that a large number of the people who were attacked that night on Swan Street were young adults and teenagers. More than 3 people that sheltered with me were under the age of 17. And so a significant number of the peaceful protesters that have gone out to express their outrage, to express their pain, to express their feelings of alienation at a policing system that is not protecting them, that is not supporting them, and is outright killing them, have been met with a considerable amount of violence, way beyond anything I have ever seen, and way beyond anything that makes sense in terms of what they are responding to.
Can you hold just 1 second for me? I gotta take something.
Are you talking to me, Hal? Talking to Camara? It's Holly?
Yes.
Okay, you're live. Camara, thank you for sharing that. And I, the night that was happening, I was talking to your folks, and I shared that with some folks on this call and others. And you saw the one of the things that when we talk about the need for policing reform, that's such a generalized term. But when it gets down to cultural issues, it does matter. The people have lived experiences. I believe that a lot of times, and I don't know who the officers were, but I just believe that what part of what's missing in policing is that a lot of people, not just DC, but in so many places. When I lived in Atlanta, when you had people who knew the community and knew the people, especially local police officers. But what's going on now? Because I don't think the protests are going to stop because of this. I think it's going to stay around a few more days, and I think it's day 9.
Yeah.
Right. How can folks support? What can folks do? People are watching this. How can they support? And Holly, I'm going to cue you up so you can talk about what we need to do, how we need to do our unity campaign, how people can get plugged in, because we're getting close to the time, and we are going to need to end at 5, because the back end of this has to go. I know they have another show at 6, so we have to end on time. So tell us how to be supportive, and thank you for all y'all are doing. And my first tear gassing experience was in Atlanta, and many other folks in it's not a fun. There's nothing. TV, you think it's and if you don't know what to do, it's not an experience that I wish on anybody. It's not as simple. It's not what it looks like on television on the TV shows. And even watching it, unless you experience it, it's a whole nother thing.
No, it really is not. And so in terms of what you can do to help protect protesters and people who are continuing to go out, because people ain't going home. There are organizations and people who are starting up now, right? Like there is a second wave of people who are now trying to come in for those of us who have now tried to back off a bit because of our experiences over the last couple of nights. Like, this is not stopping. It's gotten bigger, and it's going to continue to get bigger. I think the biggest thing you all can do is to support bail funds in your locality, right? So in DC, obviously we don't have cash bail, but the DC Freedom Fighters, if you follow them on Instagram, have a fund where they're doing emergency support for protesters who've experienced medical emergencies. And that has happened significantly, right? Like, being shot with a rubber bullet is not just like you brush that off. Oftentimes people have significant internal injuries afterwards. So DC Freedom Fighters, if you're in DC, is a good place to look, but also Black Lives Matter DC is equally a place to donate, as they have started a fund for protesters as well. But look to see who the protesters and the protesting organizations are in your locale. You might have to use Twitter and just kind of search like your area protest to find out, because I'm pretty sure that those people are in need of also supplies. So things like medical supplies, goggles, milk to be able to get tear gas out of people's eyes Like there are very, very clear medical and protection type needs that exist throughout the cities that are protesting. I know especially in New York, I know especially in DC, and I know especially in Missouri, right? So there has to be, I think that that's the biggest issue now, if people want to support protesters and be behind them, is to ensure that they have the supplies they need to keep coming out every day. I think also standing in opposition to these curfews were made as as a response back to what is being described as a lot of civil unrest, although we are unclear of where that unrest is originating.
Earlier to invoke a 200-year-old law on US
that civil unrest has been stoked by the police, or that a lot of the violence has been stoked by police officers. And so it is unclear to us why these curfews are necessary to corral peaceful protesters, and they are being used largely to antagonize and arrest people who happen to be out after 8 p.m. or whenever the curfews are. So please stand in opposition with us to any of these curfews continuing. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Kamara. Holly, talk to us about what we're doing at the National Coalition. Right? How about that?
What we're doing
in our unity campaign, and I'll share a little bit, and we're gonna, and then I'm gonna ask you ladies. I'm gonna change the question from what I have. I'm gonna ask you the same question I asked the first power table Black women leaders about what you think about the VP situation. So Holly.
Well,
so
first thing everyone can do, thank you, Melanie, and claps to all these powerful women that we have on this call, this panel, as well as the one before. I needed this. I needed to hear the inspiration. I needed to hear the power. And that's a big part of what we're doing here at the National Coalition and the Black Women's Roundtable. It is Black Women's Roundtable Census Week this week. And so we understand that the police violence and abuse of power that we're protesting right now are a direct outcome of Black communities being undercounted and underrepresented at every level of government. Let's be clear, census data is used to decide a lot of things that impact our money, power, and respect. It's used to decide how many state representatives we have. It's used to decide how federal funds are spent. And it's even used to decide how we manage discrimination in this country and our civil liberties. So it impacts everything. So we're spending a lot of time in helping people to connect to their power through taking the census. And let's not forget, yesterday was an election day in many locales, including Pennsylvania, Washington, D.C., and Maryland, amongst others. We have other election days coming up. You know, don't let the press fool you. It is important for you to vote. It's never been more important than this year. I've been working and voting for over 25 years, and to see what we're dealing with now, if we want to permanently change some of these conditions that we're protesting, we need to shift who gets to make the decisions in our society, which means we must reclaim our power as citizens. And we thought we were going to run a program for about 6 months called Do To in 2020. We're running that all year long because we know we're going to have until October 31st to complete our census, and it's time for us to get ready to vote. Registration is down in record numbers in this country. We've never seen a voter registration rate as low as we have in more than 50 years. We normally, I'll just
say that again.
We haven't seen voter registration rates this low in more than 50 years. So part of it is because motor voter registers about 45% of all voters. That's been closed. So that's lost automatically. Due to Corona, correct. A lot of this due to Corona. Many of the groups on this phone, we haven't been able to do our activism work at events and citizenship ceremonies and high school graduations. That's a big place for registering people, and especially our young people. So we gotta get out there and register people. We gotta encourage them to use our online tools. So you can find out more about all of what we're doing at our unitycampaign.org.
Thank you, Holly. Thank you, Holly. Thank you, Holly. One of the other things we wanted to share is with our Black Women's Roundtable. Many of our leaders that were on this are on the ground, and our coalition affiliates are on the ground doing work. Sheila was one of them, Reverend Judy's another, and many others in the states that we're in, to really focus on these issues around racial, racial justice issues, focusing on the economic justice issues. We have a justice project that we've been working on since last year. And so we're just picking right on up with that. And we're going to continue to fight. And my main concern, we're going to be looking at we have to look at what happened in these primaries, and want everybody out there to pay attention, because a lot of people did not get their ballots. It's not a panacea to say that we need to use mail, vote by mail. I know some of y'all on this call didn't get your ballot or got it at the last minute. You had to get in the car and drive it down, or you felt better about driving it down. So we've got to really pay attention. People are not going to, you think about how we take our people to the polls, church vans. If coronavirus is impacting us and we're impacting us like it has been for the last 90 plus days, how are we going to ask churches to put people in vans and take them to the polls? We can't get into the senior citizens centers. Our young people may or may not be on the campus. There's so many things that we have to be concerned about. And so we're going to continue at the National Coalition and with Black Women's Roundtable and Black You Vote and all of these organizations. The coalition is about coalition. We make sure that we try to provide opportunities for our leaders with titles and no titles come to a table that they can maximize our impact. And if ever there's a time for us to come together and maximize our power, it's now. So I want to thank the panelists. I was going to put you all on. I'm just asking you to raise your hand. Those who believe it's time for a Black woman vice presidential vice president in this country. Thank you. And I thank the audience. Again, thank Roland Martin Unfiltered for being our media partner. And you can follow us at the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation and Black Women's Roundtable on Facebook, on Instagram at the National Coalition, and at Black Women's Roundtable on Twitter. And you can follow me at Coalition Builder. And we thank all of our leaders again, those on the first panel. And tune in to our next Black Women's Power Table. And thanks everyone. Be safe. Don't forget to do 2 things. Vote, be counted, and 3 things. Let's keep resisting. Let's keep protesting. We can have transformational change in this country. Our young people are leading us, and all of us seasoned folks are going to support you and follow you. And as soon as I can make sure that I can get out there in the streets like I normally want to be, Corona's holding me back. I got pre-existing conditions. It's killing me not being out there. But those who are out there on the front lines, we have to support them. Thank you. Love you.